Working It Out, a podcast show about diversity, equity, and inclusion in our workplaces, our communities, and our lives. A show where we put diversity and inclusion to work.
Got problems on the job, we're working it out. Workplace got you stressing, we're working it out. Yeah, we're working it out, working it out, working it out. Dr. V.
Hello, I'm Dr. Vanessa Weaver, your host of Working It Out. And today, on this episode, we're going to meet an exciting expert in the areas of disability. Her name is Dr. Linda Mona. And guess what? She's a California licensed clinical psychologist. I'm a clinical psychologist, so we're already connected. And she's done a tremendous amount of work in the area of disabilities. And not only has she done research and she's published and she's renowned in this area, but she provides clinical services and training to healthcare professionals. And also she does coaching and counseling on all dimensions and elements that impact people with diversity. And so she is just phenomenal. And we're going to have a really exciting conversation with her today. And, when you think about this whole conversation or the whole topic of disability, it could be really, really broad. And she is so experienced. I want to cover everything she knows. But we're going to talk a little bit about people with disabilities and their impact or the impact of the workforce on their engagement and their commitment to stay and their ability to really contribute and give all that they can give. So before I talk anymore, let me say hello to Dr. Mona.
Hello, Dr. Weaver. Thank you for having me today.
Well, thank you. You're in one of my favorite states, California. I'm here in Metro DC, but it's been very, very progressive in the areas of disability. And I know that you've been a real contributor to that.
Yes, I have. Before we get started, I'd like to describe myself just for people who might be listening in or watching who have visual differences. I am a white woman with brown hair, and I have pink rimmed glasses on, and I have on a multicolored dark themed blouse, and my pronouns are she and her. So I just want to I like to do that when I start off, just to make sure that I'm including everybody in my community, but also help to model describing ourselves when we're doing this kind of educational series.
That is really insightful, because rarely do I introduce myself that way. So that is just a gift to me. So thank you so much. And I'm going to practice that as I introduce myself, because again, it is more inclusive, and it doesn't make assumptions that everybody who hears you or has the same ability to connect to be introduced to you. In fact, the fact that you did that is consistent with some of the work you've done where you've challenged the medical notions of disability by reframing it with the multicultural lens. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means?
Sure, I'd be happy to talk about that. So I have loved my work looking at the way that we can infuse disability into diversity dialogues. I really feel like talking about disability in the multicultural world has been one of the most under-discussed topic areas. And I think it's for a couple of reasons, one of which is that lack of awareness. I think disability is seen as a medical diagnosis. I think companies and organizations see disability and they want to know how much money it's going to take to have somebody in, how they're going to, have their accommodations met. And I think what they're really missing with all of this is this diverse perspective. So in the diversity, equity, and inclusion world, we're always talking about, we're not trying to fill quotas here. We want, LGBT people of color, we want them here, and we want them at the table because of their life experience, their worldview, and how that infuses into their area of expertise. I think that's what's missing. And so I think when companies or organizations or whoever is looking at this topic increase awareness around it and act with intention and say, we're just going to do this, right? We're just going to do it. I mean, we're talking about 15% of the globally of the population live with disability.
I was gonna say that, when you talked about that, the diversity stats are really interesting. And again, we don't have enough time to really go through all of those. But you just mentioned the fact that 15% of the global workforce consists of people with disabilities. But when you talked about these workplaces that have a commitment to diversity, that have or diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they've committed resources, another study we looked at showed that 90% of these companies that express this commitment and in fact acting on that commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in their workplaces, only 4% of them actually have a program or focus on people with disabilities. Why is that? That's kind of disappointing when I saw that only 4%.
Yeah. Right. And, I just want to sink into my seat, when I think of that as a disabled woman, which I didn't say in my introduction. I described my outwardly noticeable characteristics, but I am a wheelchair using woman. So, I think it's important information, and right as we say, it's an opportunity. I think it's been under discussed. We know that over the last 15 to 20 years, we've only seen rates of employment of people with disabilities that range from 17 to 22%. So even at that highest level of 22% of people working, I think we fly under the radar in some ways. And I also think it's because we haven't really been seen as a diverse group, right? So we have to work first on helping people to conceptualize disability outside of medical notions, to look at the complexity of the experience, the oppression, the institutional bias, the attitudes about disability. Look at all of those things, change that definition, and then every single process that changes with hiring, onboarding, asking about accommodations, that those things are universally threaded through every part of the work process. Because when that happens, it will quickly identify people, and they will say, oh, they thought about it. They actually thought about who I am in the world. Maybe that really means they want me and they value me. So that's so important, like psychologically, and as we start to think about legacy planning and bringing people in, it is the ideal message. And for people who might be a little uncomfortable with coming out right away around disability, they know that the employer has set up a forum in which to have that conversation. And they can test the waters out and go back and have that conversation later.
Well, I appreciate you talking about that whole notion of coming out. And I want to explore that a little bit. Yes. Because in our firm Alignment Strategies, we've worked with companies to set up employee resource groups. And there have been two particular cohorts that have been most challenging for us to make them more comfortable in establishing these employee resource groups. And one is LGBTQ. And the second has been people with disabilities, particularly those people that don't have that. So what do you call a visible disability? That's the terminology. They tend to be really reluctant and uncomfortable. And that's probably based on what you just shared with us, the fact that they experience bias, that people make assumptions. There is an equity for them in the workplace as they see other people have.
I'm glad that you brought up that topic, because when we've looked at the way that definitions of diversity have expanded over the years, it was people of color, ethnicity, and race, and gender. We went through the long list that we usually list when we talk about it. And then we saw LGBT folks added on. And then after that, we saw disability. The LGBT community has been instrumental with helping bring disability in, because if you think about it, we're two groups that are kind of different from the other groups that we hear about, right? We don't necessarily have people in our families who look like us or sound like us, right? Not all LGBT people have other LGBT people, or maybe they do, they're just not out. But not all people with disabilities grow up in a family where people look like them. So that cultural tradition is not handed down in the same way as we might see with race, ethnicity, and gender. And so it makes it very difficult for people to really, there aren't a lot of incentives to positively identify as somebody with a disability. That has become different over years. We have talked a lot about disability pride and talked about how powerful the community can be when they are together. And I also want to just comment too on, as with other diverse groups, not all one size fits all, right? So we have different types of people with different types of disabilities, and they've had different life experiences. And so when, I was thinking about this the other day, you just mentioned, the issue of visible versus non-visible disabilities. And those are terms I used to use all of the time. And somebody said to me the other day, we really don't want to use those words because that's bringing in visual disability or difference. We want to say apparent and non-apparent, right? I think I know everything about disability, but clearly I did not, right?
The second thing you taught me today.
But I'm fine with that. Please let me know. Let me know how I can be more embracing. Let me know how I can use a platform such as this one to say, okay, let me start modeling apparent and non-apparent. But the difference with non-apparent disabilities is making the decision to disclose. Yeah. Do you disclose? Do you not? How much do you hide it? Can you pass? Can you get through without somebody knowing? That's a huge, huge burden to carry on your shoulders. And that's why if you really kind of systematically change practices from the beginning, let's say with HR or, with even in, hiring or interview processes saying, we have a diverse workforce. We are accustomed to having people with disabilities here. We have a great system for providing reasonable accommodations so that barriers are not in place for people to advance in our company. Something small like that really helps invite people and let them know that, okay, this might be a place I want to work.
Well, we had talked about the whole connection between engagement and the lived experience of people with disabilities in the workforce. And that Mercer study that I talked about was like the state of disabilities in the workplace. And I know that's not the exact title, but we're going to put it on our website so people can get the exact
right.
title. But in that particular study, they showed that between 6 and 13%, there's a 6 to 13% difference in the level of engagement of people with disabilities in the workforce. And we define engagement as the willingness of a colleague, of a workforce colleague, to engage in discretionary effort. That's the extra that they bring in. And we know when there's a gap of 5 points, that's pretty significant. And one that we tell companies you need to really, really focus on. And we have this gap of 6 to 13 points with people with disabilities. And I just wonder, oh my goodness, what loss organizations are having by really not thinking about and not fostering more engagement. Because we do know when in organizations, when people are more engaged, they're more productive, they're more innovative. You have lower absenteeism rates, you have lower safety issues, safety incidents, you have higher morale, better customer connections, more customer, what we call customer centricity. So engagement matters. Yet that data shows that companies who aren't really focused on this with people with disabilities are losing out. They're losing out.
Yeah, I think they're missing the mark with that. I think, engage, and we do have that data that suggests that when people feel more respected, more valued, and integrated into the workplace, all of these fabulous things happen, and you get more employee satisfaction. And a happy employee is one that's going to stay with you and produce and all of those things. I think what is happening, I think a few things could be happening. One of which is somebody doesn't have the right accommodations. And so they're struggling to just even to show up, to be at work, to do what they're supposed to do because they don't have an environment, or because timing, people want to be meeting at 7:30, 8 in the morning, and time can be an accessibility issue because some people rely upon public transportation. Some people have personal assistants or actual people who help them execute their day. So there's so many different factors in the disability world that can intervene with that. I also think it's about recognizing who those people are. And that is by having, if somebody's going to have a group, a resource group, that it's put out there. Even if 2 people are there, let the people know that that's your priority, to learn more and to know more. I think people are afraid to talk about disability, or they don't know how to do it. And so instead of doing it, they don't say anything at all.
Yeah, they act like it's not there.
They act like it's not there. And I think that that really sends a message that people don't really care. And I don't think that's always the case. I think there are people who care. And I think subtle actions can really help show that. I was just thinking about an experience. I have, autoimmune condition, but also I have tons of food allergies, right? And so I was thinking the other day, we had, in one of my workplaces, we had this, we had like an orientation, or so there was some kind of meeting, we were all getting together, and a supervisor of mine ordered gluten-free pizza. And it said Dr. Mona on top of the box. And I came, because I brought my own. I can never eat anything, right? I can never eat there. So I'm like, I'll just bring my own. Mm-hmm. And I thought, why does this mean so much to me? Like, why does it mean so much to me that at the end of the table where I can pull my wheelchair, it's kind of sectioned off for me, and the gluten-free pizza with my name on it is right there. That shows that somebody sees me, and it shows that they're willing to and wanting to embrace me into even social gatherings, right? And that is really important for folks to feel like they are a part of a company. I think asking for people's viewpoints. So we know that sometimes, because people with disabilities might have a difference with speech, hearing, sight, something like that, it might take them a little bit longer to participate. We need to create time for people to do that. We need to say, okay, it's going to take this person longer. We have to stop with this kind of ableist notion that we go fast, and we value people who work faster and produce more, because that's a trap. It's a trap for all of us, but that's ableism.
Right. And they assume because they're working faster, they're producing more. That's not necessarily the case.
That's true.
Well, I was struck. I want to ask your opinion about this.
Yes.
Because I feel that COVID has been a great equalizer in this whole disability conversation, because particularly around accommodations, because, one of the big arguments was that accommodations has a cost to the organization, and, and it limits how much people can connect, or it hurts the bottom line, and then we get COVID. Because some of the accommodation might be better for some people with certain disabilities to work from home, and they could be just as productive as working from home as anybody else. And COVID showed us that people are very productive when they work from home. So I think it dispelled that whole bias around accommodations allowing people to work from home. What's been your experience with that? What's your take on this COVID?
Thank you for bringing this up, because this whole global pandemic has hit the disability community in a multitude of ways. Sadly, issues around devaluing of lives of people with disabilities, healthcare rationing, not thinking somebody has a quality of life, not giving them a respirator because it's seen that they're not as valuable as somebody else. So there's been this really heartfelt sadness in the community. So there's that underlying. The other side of this is kind of this bittersweet notion, like, we've been telling non-disabled people all along. We've been telling you that, flexible work schedules and working from home, having, less environmental barriers, because typically most people have a home that's accessible to them. It's easier to kind of have your personal assistant service, caregivers, whatever you want to call the people who assist you with facilitating your life, all in the workplace. So it's kind of like, we've been telling you this. And then also, like, within 5 days, everyone, okay, we're going to do all this telework now. So it has affected, I think, in a great way, because it will now give more access to people to have either a hybrid work style or a complete telework work life, which is it's a win-win, right? We know productivity can go up. We know all these things about it. So I think, it has been a fearful time for those people who are immunocompromised, which really many people didn't leave the house at all until vaccines came out. And I know this is a whole other discussion, but to really think about it, I heard all these people complaining about being locked up, and I said, well, what are these people complaining about? Like, I live with disability. There have been times in my life I've been pulled out for chronic health issues, or, I know how to do this. Mm-hmm. I know how to stay at home. Right. But I thought, okay, another disability cultural value, because most people are used to doing exactly what they want to do when they want to do it. They're not used to having a specific type of transportation or utilizing caregivers or whatever that might be. But I'm like, this feels familiar. It feels familiar because I've done it before. And, and I can help my team and everybody that I work with sharing, what works for me in these situations when I have less choice, right? So people with disabilities are used to having less choice with these types of things. And I think that's another value that we bring to it, because we know what that feels like. We know how to negotiate. We know how to say things in such a way to help further the goals that need to occur.
Well, when I opened up the show, I talked about all of these incredible contributions that you continue to make in this whole area of disabilities. And one that intrigued me was that as part of your counseling and part of your practice, you in fact provide sex counseling.
I do.
Now, this is not an X-rated topic we're going to get into, but I was intrigued by that. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Why did you choose to engage in that as part of your practice?
Right. So, and thank you for bringing it up, right? Because I think it's, relationships and intimacy is a part of everyone's life, and it is part of the lives of people with disabilities. I mean, I think early on, I was doing a lot of peer counseling, even when I was a teenager. I'm like, I can't wait to be a psychologist. And then I kept thinking, disabled people have very different life experiences. Their access to people and their experience of intimacy and their feelings about themselves sexually was really something that had been overlooked. And so I really wanted to have a forum in which to talk about how we adapt sex therapy and sex counseling, how we look at people with different bodies, different minds, and how we execute our clinical interventions and practices based upon that. Like, we see you and we're not going to compare you to non-disabled people. We're going to talk about how important it is to be loved and to love and to have an environment in which to do that. And so and it has been, again, another topic, even in the world of psychology and medicine, that has been under discussed. So I've trained lots of medical residents. I've trained lots of psychology residents, and really have to hammer in, like, you ask everybody about sex, right? You ask people about this in your intake because it makes them feel like whole and as a person. And for people who are newly disabled, it's huge, right? Because they've lived their whole life a certain way. And to come in as a clinician and say that builds your rapport with them. And
because you're accepting them and you're relating to their current reality.
Exactly. Well, and I think sometimes in the workplace, right, what ends up happening is we all have our implicit biases. I'm sure you've done 1,000 shows on implicit bias, but, we all have that. And I think there's an assumption that people who look like me, or people who use wheelchairs, or people who have, differences in sight or vision or cognition, that they're not partnered. They're not partnered. They're not in relationships. They're certainly not parents. They're certainly,
in fact, your life defies all of those biases. Tell us a little bit about your own life and how you decided to, let love in your life, and you have children. I mean, you just decided to live your life boldly.
I did. And, we were just talking to our kids. Yeah. So I am married to my husband, Harold Hunter, and I have 2 kids, Kyle and Ryan Mona Hunter, which were those parents that hyphenated because the name ended with us. We decided to do that. So I remember in 1996 in finishing graduate school, and and my husband is Black, he's Jamaican. And we were in my little apartment in Atlanta. And I said, if we're going to go through this, you realize this is going to be no joke of a life. It's like, we have color difference, we have disability. And my husband's not like me, he's very understated. He said to me, bring it on. And I think that's what we've done. I'm like, okay, we're going to do this. But we went into this knowing it was not going to be easy. And it was not, easy. And, trying to find healthcare providers who would look at me as a disabled woman and, say things to me like, you want to have children? Have you ever thought about how difficult that might be as a disabled person? And of course, I'm going to keep it clean here, but I wanted to say was, you really think I haven't thought about that? Yeah. You really think that I haven't thought about, like, I have this all planned. I know how to do this. And you know what? My parenting isn't going to look the same as somebody else. Yeah. Right. And so,
mine.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And so, I feel privileged as, a disabled mom to have the life that I have. And and to have the support of my family with the work that I do. And so, so I really, they're the best parts of my life. I mean, I couldn't think of a bigger gift. I love being a psychologist. I love helping other people. I'm not afraid of a difficult discussion, so bring it my way and I'll try to help whoever I can with those discussions. But, it's family's important, and that it leaks into our work life too.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's all the elements of who you are, right?
Right.
Well, Dr. Mona, we're going to have you back because we've only talked about half of this outline that I have here, but you're so fascinating and so helpful.
I have to come back anytime. I'll come back anytime.
So let me ask you this, though, before we wrap up. Can you give me 3 points to organizations or companies around what they can do to be more inclusive with people with disabilities? What would be the top 3 things you would share?
I would say, actively look to increase your knowledge and skills and abilities around disability. Seek information, look at what other companies have done, look at best practices, think what might make sense with your own company so that you can really make it a priority. Don't put it as number 32 on your to-do list, right? Do not do that. And then act with intention, right? So put the program, act with intention and make some changes and realize that, you need to set a foundation and infrastructure to bring in people with disabilities onto your team and into your organization. And and the third thing that I would say is, we all make mistakes. And so I would really like for people to create a safety net to know that, part of making change is allowing yourself to try things out, it's better to say a word and maybe say it in a non-preferred way than not say it at all, because then you have the opportunity to repair. Yeah. If you don't say it and you don't act with it, then you never know what you might be missing out on.
Even today, you've taught me a couple of things in this interview in terms of new languaging and things like that, which I appreciate. Well, Dr. Mona, like I said, I really want to have you back and to get into some of these topics in more depth. So on behalf of our audience, on behalf of me and our team, I really want to thank you for being part of the show. I'm Dr. Vanessa Weaver, your host of Working It Out, and we're going to have to sign off right now. But I wish each of you a safe, productive, and what we call Be Happy week. Bye-bye.
Working It Out is brought to you by Alignment Strategies, a management consultancy with more than 3 decades of experience in diversity, equity and inclusion, and organizational development. To learn more, visit alignmentstrategies.com.
Got problems on the job, we're working it out. Workplace got you stressing, we're working it out. We're working it out, working it out, working it out.